G'day everyone, I'm Nick for the Talk and Power podcast. Glad you could join us. We're going to be bringing you something a little bit different to what we've normally done. We're going to be bringing you stories from the garage, and they are literally what that means. It's stories from people's garages, and it doesn't necessarily mean cars that they're building now. We're going to take a step back in time where we catch up with a heap of people and we talk with some of the cars that they built literally from their garages. So we really hope you enjoy that. First episode off the rank is a gentleman by the name of Michael Frost. I've known Michael for a very long time, and he tells a story of the 1 year, 12-month build that he did of his HG/K Monaro. So very interesting story. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll kick this series off with episode 1 with Michael Frost. Okay, I'm here with Michael Frost. He's all the way from Victoria, Melbourne. Shouldn't hold that against you, Michael. Thanks for joining us on the Talk and Power podcast.
Hey, Nick, thanks for having me. It's a privilege to be on, and I hope my story brings a few laughs and a few tears to a few people's eyes.
No, I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. Look, one of the things that we're doing at the moment with our podcast is just interviewing people in their sheds and out and about. And during this time where we're unable to interview people in person, we're just catching up with people over the phone or over Zoom in this case. So we really appreciate your time. I know it's 8 o'clock over there, so we really appreciate that. Michael, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's wind back the clock. So we're talking early 80s here for yourself. Tell us, what was the car scene like, particularly in Melbourne? What was it like back then?
Well, around my car days started around 78, 79 and really got into it around 1980, but they were Monaros, Tiranas, a few of the old two-door Tirana Peter Brock style with a 350 slammed in them. He had a mate of mine with a Charger, and he had a 360 in it, fully worked 360. A lot of EH holders running around with 202s fully worked in. No disc brakes, I might add, just to top it off. And quite a few old HR Holdens, and that was generally the scene. A lot of GTHOs and XRGTs as well.
Yep. So this was southeast Melbourne in the time?
Yeah, southeast Melbourne and western suburbs. I was traditionally from the western suburbs in Melbourne, so it was big over there. There wasn't a lot to do where I was brought up, and cars were a big part of the culture, particularly as we're growing up. And there was always keen to as soon as you turn 18, to get your first car. And if I think back, it was too much horsepower with too little inexperience, I would say.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, talking of your first car, give us a rundown on your first car.
Well, actually, the first car I had wasn't my car. It was my mate's car. He didn't have a license, and his dad gave him the car. So I used to drive him around. It was a HD 65 Holden, I think it was, a 66.
Oh, wow. Yep.
We basically broke it. We used to drive it real hard, 3 on the tree. I think it was a 161 in those days, I think, off memory. We used to regularly break engine mounts from rollbacks, and eventually the whole car just gave up and we moved on from there. And then, then we moved into a series of just cars to get us around. And then I worked in a car yard. I wasn't a trained mechanic, but just fixing cars. There's another guy there that was pretty good at cars, so he pointed us in the right direction. And every night we used to take a different car home. So we took an XO GT home one night, 4-door, and scared the bejesus out of ourselves with that thing. Yeah. Kimberley, there's a whole range of them. And then I saw a HK Monaro for sale. It was a bit beaten up on that, and I purchased it at a bargain price, I thought, with a 307 Chev. Little did I know that it was probably going to cost me a hell of a lot more money to get it into the shape it was. So that was my introduction to the Monaro. I fell in love with it the minute I saw it, and I thought, well, this is the car for me.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that Monaro then. It was a HG or it was H?
No, HK. So it was a HK 307. It was one of the first run. Had 307. It had the GDS guards with the air vents, which didn't actually do anything, and power glide, 2-speed transmission, Salisbury diff, etc. It became pretty apparent after a few months that it needed some serious work on the back because of rust.
Yep.
And made a decision that this thing wasn't going to last too long. So in the meantime, I bought an XR Ford to get me to work. I think I paid about $400 for it. And that's a story in itself. It only had 3 on the tree, but the first gear had a broken cog, so you can only drive it in second and third. And you had reverse occasionally, you could get reverse. So that served me well for 12 months. So we put the Monaro in the garage. We stripped it completely down to nothing, pulled the shell out, took that down the tip in those days, and we bought another shell. We actually drove past the house nearby, and the guy had a HG shell in the front yard. So we made him an offer, and we picked it up, and we took it home and put it back in the garage. So how do we go about putting it all back together? It's crazy. We used to go down to the library and take the manual out for it because you couldn't buy a manual for it.
Yep.
And after 2 weeks, take it back and get it re-stamped. And then we sort of started work from there on it and started to, we had drawings we made that I'd made, pictures that I'd taken on a Kodak camera that I'd developed, so I knew how to put parts back where they were.
Yeah, okay.
And then just over a space of 12 months, just gradually put it back together. And did quite a bit of work on the engine and that in the meantime.
Because there was you didn't have the luxury of Google back then or electronic media where you could go and watch a YouTube video and watch it back, or how these parts come together. So that's how you had to do it back in the day. Actually take photos, develop them, and use it as a reference to reassemble the car.
Oh, yeah, but you do other things. You go down to Wreckers and have a look at a car that was in the Wreckers, how bits and pieces were put together. I was fairly fortunate. I had a good mate who was a mechanic, so he'd pop his head in every now and then and make sure it was on the right thing. But, yeah, we got the body of that HG, and it was a manual, so we had to weld some parts into the tunnel to reinforce it, to put the auto in. And then we had to put all the diff back in, etc. With the engine, it was a 307, so I got a friend to bore it out to a 350, and he brought back the short block. So I reassembled the engine using the manual. I can remember starting it on the floor with water flowing, running through on a garden hose, just to get it to turn over. Make sure it would turn over before I put it back in the engine, in the car. So we did a lot of those things. I was fairly fortunate that the electronics, or I use the word electronics, electrics, I should say. When I put the loom back in, etc., it all just basically worked, which in those days, if the electrics were a problem, they were problematic for a long time. So we did all that. I put it all back together. We had to put windscreens in, all the dashes, etc. I had to tar it, etc.
So tell us, Michael, the specifications of this beast.
Hey, Nick, look, it was originally HK 307 Monaro, but it became a hybrid, so it had a HG body, HK front, went out to a 350 two-bolt mains, had a 2-speed power glide transmission, all cooler fitted, 650 Holley double pumper pumped up through the bonnet with a hole in the bonnet, and a power scoop on the top. I should say fiberglass power scoop.
Yep.
Heavy duty suspension, coil springs were cut with an oxy, which is no longer allowed, of course. Track rods on the rear, a Salisbury diff, which was the big thing in those days. Heavy duty shockers, and on the back of it, it had a painted black louver, which was all the rage to keep the sun out in those days.
They were. I had a Commodore back in the very early 90s, and that had a louver as well. And because that's what you did. That's how they came out. And they did. They looked cool back in the day.
But there were lots of other bits and pieces, like a mild cam, 2100 RPM high stall converter, and it just goes on and on. You just put just kept adding bits and pieces.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure it performed any better. It certainly went quicker, but it didn't go around corners real well.
So you had 14s on the front and 15s on the rear on that one.
15s, and it was normal, I think 14s by 7s or 8s on the front. I think 15s by 8 or 10s, depending on. We actually had 2 sets of wheels for the rear. We had extra wide ones with not a lot of tread when we went down to the Mad Max road, and then the standard ones when we're out doing other things. But sway bar, rear sway bar was the norm with track rods. I'm not sure what they actually did apart from probably look good, but they supposedly improved their handling. But I think I've got to remember there's a massive amount of steel in the back half of those cars, and it's not to get them around a corner at any speed was obviously a challenge.
No, that's right. That's right. And I take my hat off to, I think it was Norm Beachy that may have won Bathurst in one of those.
Yes, we used to watch Norm race against Alan, and we used to be barracking for the Monaro every time.
I bet. Yeah. Tell us a little bit. We've discussed this in the past when we caught up. So the garage where you built the car, it was a brick floor. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, it was a tin garage with a corrugated iron with a wooden frame, and it was the guy that I rented the house off. He had paved the garage with the old style bricks where they're not smooth.
Yeah.
So you can imagine trying to use a engine stand on that with wheels. So it had its own difficulties.
Yeah.
And when it rained, of course, it was fairly damp in there because the roof wasn't the best. So
yeah.
But it did its job. It served. It was good. It was locked up, and you could come back and work on it every night. But it was, it was a challenge. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was really was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, for my mind, it's really the quintessential car from that era, because if we cast our minds back to a similar era, a lot of people would remember a movie Australian movie that is, called Running on Empty. And to me, it's the quintessential. It's in the opening scene. It's probably the most, I guess you could argue it's the not the star of the movie, but it was probably one of the most famous cars in its time. And I don't know, when I look at your car, that's the car I think. And if those that are watching the video, that you can see it on the screen now, actually, that's the quintessential opening scene to Running on Empty, and it reminds me of yours. We showed your car a little bit earlier on the video, so those watching the video can see that, or go to our Facebook page. You'll be able to see pictures of Michael's Monaro that we've been referring to. It really typifies that era, doesn't it?
Look, I think, it does. I think there were a hell of a lot of cars that were a lot more modified than my car, certainly. My car was its nickname was the Beast.
Yeah.
It was quick in a straight line. Cornering was optional. Braking was optional. It was built within the legal limits, but, heap of horsepower, 2-speed transmission that if you didn't have an oil cooler on, you blew one every 6 months. I ripped it out, put it in. We had a thing called, maybe some people remember, called track rods, which were basically a long piece of square tube steel with some clamps to go over your springs. We put station wagon springs in the rear end and that would stop diff hop. There was a whole range of things we did to it that I'd suggest wouldn't be allowed these days. And just, and all with a 10 or 12-inch steering wheel, trying to turn with no power steering. There's no such thing as power steering then, unless you were driving a Statesman or something like that, or a Fairlane, if you're lucky enough to have a classic Ford Fairlane. You drive all that. Brakes probably lasted 2 or 3 applications at higher speeds.
Yeah.
And we used to frequent a place in Melbourne where if you look at one of the Mad Max movies where the Fords go through the caravan.
Oh, yeah.
The car flies through the caravan. We used to frequent that, and I wouldn't say that we drove on that road. We certainly just went down for a look.
Of course. I think the statutes of limitation have exceeded now anyway, so you're probably saying.
Anyway, that was a big congregation, and it's interesting. We're just starting to see the rotaries come. Yep. And you saw the Mazda rotaries and things like that. So it was just starting to change a little bit.
Michael, tell us a little bit about, in my mind, in 2020, where we're living now, we've kind of lost our way in terms of garage builds. We don't see the garage build happening much anymore. We're seeing young guys, they might get a car, they might do a bit of work to it, but generally speaking, they go off to a workshop nowadays and they come back completed or near completed. What are your thoughts on that? How do we get this younger generation back into doing like what you did?
Well, look, I think a couple of things for me is that there's amazing resources available now. You know, with Google, all that type of thing, the car pages. I know my son had a few problems with his car. I just Googled it, fixed the problem straight away. Like, there's so much information available. I think sometimes they're limited by a lot of the legislation and rules too, so that they've got to get things done outside. But I'd be saying to anyone who wants to have a crack at pulling a car apart and rebuilding it, there is so much information available. It's never been easier to do it. And I just say, put it in your garage and have a go.
Yeah,
and do the things that you want to do to it. And, you know, I enjoyed it. I don't enjoy working on cars as much as I used to, but also the other thing too, Nick, is cars are more plug and play now too. So, you know, a lot of plug and play with computers and that, so that probably holds it back. But I just reckon you just, you know, like I could still fix my son's car. I'll take the theory, I'll have a bit of a go at it and see how we go.
Yeah, no, fair enough. No, that's fair enough. And Michael, tell us what are you getting around in these days?
Well, I've just got an XR6 FGU. It's one with a lot. It's got everything on it. And honestly, I won't suggest I exceed the limit, but it is a bit of a jet. And it drives like it's got 19 inches. She drives like she's on rails. So she's a beauty. So, yeah, I used to have a sedan, but I've just gone back to a ute, and I literally just come back from loading up with firewood, so just keeping the family happy so the fire's going.
Fair enough. No, that's fair enough. Hey, look, Michael, thanks for your time on coming on for this interview. Look, I really appreciate it. Tell us thoughts, any cars in the future that you're thinking of doing yourself? I know you got the ute now, but are you looking at some plans in the future?
Well, I think down the track I'll do something. I haven't got time at the moment because obviously it's very trying times at the moment with all the things that are going on. So I'm fairly busy with my work and family. But eventually, when things subside, I'd like to do something. But Nick, I'll show you about as close as I get to a Monaro these days, mate.
There it is. Those that are watching the video, he's just held up a HG. That's a 1/18 scale HG GDS.
Yeah, so no, it's Thanks, Nick.
Hey, Michael, really appreciate your time on coming on the podcast. It's great to have you on, and thanks for helping us out. Really appreciate it.
Look, Nick, I appreciate it. I hope my ramblings take a few people's minds off the current situation, even if it's just for a few laughs.
Yeah, no, certainly, and we really appreciate that. All right,
good night,
take
Nick.
care. See ya.
Okay, I really hope you enjoyed that interview with Michael Frost. One of the things he said off air was, at the time, back in 1980, money was a little bit short, and hence the reason why he built the car himself and did all that work himself. It just wasn't that sort of money around back in those days to take it to shops to get work done. And why Monaro? Well, he was pretty hooked on the car itself. I mean, I guess who wasn't, and who isn't even these days? They're a magnificent piece of Australian automotive history. We really hope you enjoyed that interview. We're going to be doing more of these. So if you have a story to tell us from your garage, drop us a line, drop us an email, reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, go to our website. There's a contact us page there as well. Or drop us an email to info@talkandpower.net. We really hope you enjoyed that episode, and thanks for tuning in. Take care, everyone. We'll see you from the garage.